don't count. All right.
What was your name?
My name is Mick Frank, and who cares, right? What we're going to do today, some of you who saw me at the Ohio State thing, okay, thanks for coming back. Anybody seen me in my 3-hour version? I know Paul has, but I do an extended one, and then I actually have a 5-hour where we do breakouts and workshops with business owners and people. But this one is going to be 2 hours. I did this yesterday for the Dayton NARI group, and over at Recport Lumber. So, and that was kind of fun. So, before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Lucerne, Minnesota. That's the home of Cambria. 719,000 square feet of manufacturing facility that you can eat off the floor 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. That's how clean they keep it. But when I grew up in Lucerne, it was the home of the Green Giant. And Green Giant, we serve peas, we serve corn. My father was a high school football coach. He also coached baseball. He taught mathematics, and like all good high school football coaches, he eventually became assistant principal in charge of discipline. And as I sometimes say, that's when I got to know him a little bit better. When I graduated from high school, I went to a smug, elite liberal arts college in Northfield, Minnesota, called Carleton College, where after 4 years of matriculating, I graduated with a degree in smugness, because that's what they do there. They tell you for 4 years how smart you are, that you actually start to believe them. Luckily, I married well, and my wife quickly disabused me of that. And Amber, did I name you?
Huh?
Did I call you out?
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I did. I couldn't remember if I did or not. And I taught high school for 2 years, 10th grade American history and various other courses, coached football, basketball, and golf, and I liked all of it. But I just didn't know if I wanted to do it the rest of my life. And so I decided to move up to the Twin Cities and enroll in law school. There's a very well-known night law school in St. Paul called William Mitchell College of Law. Our claim to fame there, if you've ever heard of Chief Justice Berger and the Berger Court, Chief Justice Berger was a graduate of William Mitchell. I went to night law school because I didn't want to accrue debt. I wanted to work while I went to school. And while I was in law school, that's when my sales career started. I went to work for a company called Realty World. Realty World is like Century 21 or Remax or Keller Williams. I would come to Josh at Josh Real Estate Company and say, Josh, why don't you call your company Realty World Josh Realties, and we'll provide you training, management support, we'll build brand under an umbrella of a lot of companies, and hopefully do some things for you that we couldn't do for other folks, or you couldn't do on your own. And I really, at the end of 2 years of law school, I knew I did not want to be a lawyer, but I liked that whole educational process, that academic environment. So I decided to finish law school, take the bar exam, with no intention of ever practicing, nor have I practiced. You will get better advice from your barber or your hairdresser when it comes to law. So don't ask me. When I graduated from law school, I had moved up in the organization at Realty World, and I was actually what they called the regional director, which was kind of like the top job. And I ran a 5-state area. We had about 180 franchisees. And in 1986, we sold that to a large bank in the Twin Cities called Twin City Federal. And I ran it for them for 3 years. They ran into some regulatory issues, were required to dispose of all their non-banking related assets. We were one of them. We were sold to a business in Virginia. And they, in their infinite wisdom, shut down Minneapolis and decided to service everything out of Chicago. My choice was move to Chicago or do something else. I didn't want to move to Chicago. My wife didn't want to move to Chicago, so that pretty much clinched it. And we didn't move to Chicago. And what ended up happening is I bumped into a guy by the name of Harvey Luboff. And Harvey was 74 years old, and he owned a company called President Homes. President Homes was a very interesting niche builder. What they did is they helped customers that wanted to build their own home. They would do the design, provide the financing, frame it up, get it weather tight and secure, and then at that point they'd let the customer take over, do work, and manage the subcontractors of the things they didn't want to do. I thought, what a great idea. And so on my own, I didn't have enough juice to buy that, but I got together with a very large, the largest lumber yard in the Twin Cities, Shear Brother Lumber Company. I had gone to law school with John Shear, who was a member of the second generation, and he had 2 brothers and 2 cousins running it. And he introduced me And I said, we ought to buy this. You can provide all the windows, all the doors, all the lumber, all the trusses, and away we went. And we bought it. I was a 20% owner. They were an 80% owner. The year we bought it, it did, the previous year, 12 months, it did 40 homes. 7 years later, I sold out. That previous month, 12 months, we did 270 homes. So you can see we grew it quite nicely. Why did I sell out? I was a 20% owner, and they were an 80% owner. And being a 20% owner, I've thought about this. What's a good analogy to describe it? It's a bit like kissing your sister. There's really not any future in it. And that was what I felt like being a 20% owner. And I went and exercised the buy-sell agreement to buy them out. They chose to exercise it because they had the choice to buy me out because they owned 80. They bought me out, and on April Fool's Day, 1996, I opened my own company called Homeworks Partners. Same concept. But now I had 7 years of experimenting, and we could start with a clean sheet of paper. That first year and a half, we built 9 homes, and over the next 9 years after that, we built over 950 homes. We had offices in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We had offices in Milwaukee, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Minneapolis, and eventually in Clearwater, Florida. We had a guy from Milwaukee that wanted to go to Florida, so we went down there. For those of you that don't know, in 2008, a tsunami came through the building industry. On April 1st of 2008, I had 47 employees. On September 30th, it was just me. That's how quickly everything unraveled. And for my business, it was a double whammy because our proposition was, I would come to Charlie and say, Charlie, why don't you build with us, and then we get an appraisal of what we're going to build, and then we could lend up to 85% of the appraised value. And that meant that a lot of times the customer didn't have to put practically any cash in. Well, what happened is nobody believed the appraisals anymore, and all the banks wanted cash. So it changed everything I was doing. Obviously, I was struggling, so I knew the people that owned Cambria. Cambria is owned by the Davis family. And the Davis family, for those of you that don't know, has made their fortune in the production of cheese. Kraft food, 65% of all the cheese that Kraft food makes or sells is made by Davisco. They make 1,300,000 pounds of cheese a day. If you've ever had a Papa John's pizza, you've had Kraft food or you've had Davisco cheese. I knew the guy that was the patriarch and got that whole thing going, Mark Davis, and I went to Mark and I said, I need some help. He looked and we talked for over 4 months. He actually had me meet with his son, Marty, who owns Cambria, and together we talked over a 3 or 4 month period. I thought maybe we were going to have a deal. Finally, their CFO said, you know, Mick, this is a good business, but it's the wrong industry right now. We think the building industry is going to be a black hole. And so they chose to pass on the business, but over that 4 month period, I established some relationships with those guys. They liked me, and they offered me a job. I had 3 kids in college, one at St. Ben's, one at St. Thomas, and one at St. John's. Yes, I am Catholic. And I hadn't paid myself for 18 months, and I was suffering from a severe case of maltuition. I needed a job. 2 days before I got offered that job, I came home and I found my wife in the walk-in closet in the fetus position sobbing. So I thought, you know, maybe I ought to take that job. So I did. And what I did is I managed all of the corporately owned install groups. In Columbus, Ohio, we have a couple installers that install our product. Well, in Minneapolis, we have 2 or 3 in the state of Minnesota that are owned by Cambria in markets where we couldn't find suitable installers. And so I managed all that, and what I did in the process as I was doing that, I wandered around and talked to people like yourself. How many owners do we have here today? So I go wander around, talk to people like Ann or Matt or Bill or whoever, and I would ask them about their business. And what I found is that none of them, I mean 0, had an ongoing, well thought out internal sales training program. And then all of them, when I asked, would you like one, said yes, they would. I have been very fortunate when I was a an employee for Realty World because I was the 5th guy hired. And this business grew quite dramatically. And so I got to do stuff that nobody at my age or my experience should have been able to do. But it was kind of like, well, Mick, why don't you do that? You be a management trainer, okay? Okay. Or Mick, why don't you go train that thing? Well, okay. And we brought in some of the greatest trainers in the United States. How many people have ever heard of Zig Ziglar here? We brought him in to do a national or an annual year-end awards program. We brought guys like Tommy Hopkins, Mike Ferry, Floyd Wickman, Howard Britton, all these guys nationally known trainers. And I got the opportunity with Floyd Wickman to co-train a course with him. And over this period of time, I was like a sponge listening to these folks talk about selling because I was so embroiled in selling. And when I bought President Homes, I had a training program that I had been using at Realty World. It was an advanced training program on conceptual sales training. And I took that, used that at President Homes, and then when I started HomeWorks Partners, I used that, and we grew those businesses quite fast. So I said to Marty Davis, let's go out and talk to the people out in the field and show them how to sell anything better. And so that's what I did. And I took over Minnesota. It was a 5-state area. They promoted me. And when I took it over, it was doing 159,000 square feet of installed Cambria. 3 years later, we did 424,000 square feet. We grew it by 45 to 50% every year. And the reason was, A, we were getting a better market, but B, we were really partnering with our salespeople out in the field and showing them how to do whatever they sell better. And we thought if we would do that, a guy like Todd will create some loyalty towards Cambria because they're coming in and helping him grow his business. And so that's what we did. And it was very successful. So now I've been promoted again, and now I'm out on the road all the time talking to people about sales training. So what are we going to do today? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to build you a sales model that I know works. An approach to selling. All great companies should have an approach to selling. Why? How do you talk about sales if you don't have a common language? If you don't have a process that you're taking people through? The IBM way, the Xerox way, whatever it is, we're going to give you one. Then what companies should do is they should identify their strengths. What are we good at? What do we do better than anybody else? What differentiates me from the other folks so that they're not going to want to buy from John instead of me? What do I do that differentiates myself from John or Todd or Nicole or any of you folks? What do we do that is unique and different? And then what you do is and this is a process that you learn it over time. And then what you learn that you're really good at is you look for ways to bring that same process to other things. Now this will become more obvious when I talk a little bit about another experience I had. In the early 90s, I took a master's program at the University of Minnesota at the Carlson School. And we went at night because we were all working, and we had a guest lecturer come in, and his name was Gary Hamel. And I'm sure none of you have ever heard of Gary Hamel. But at the time, he was a professor at the London School of Economics. And he taught 2 nights for us, and he was absolutely fascinating. And at the end of the second night, he offered a flyer to everybody in that class, said, every summer at the London School of Economics, I do a 1-week session, and if you'd like to come, you're all invited. Of course, it was $4,500, but that included you could stay in the dorm room and eat dorm food at no charge. So it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. And so I decided to go. And I spent a week with Gary Hamel. Now, let me give you some context on that. That was the early 90s. A year ago, last January, in the Wall Street Journal on the front page, far right column, there was an article about the highest paid corporate consultant in the United States or in the world. And his name was Gary Hamel. People are paying him $100,000 a day to come in and talk to major Fortune 500 companies. That's how valuable what he has to say from a business perspective is to those folks. And I got an opportunity to listen to him for a week for $4,500, which included free room and board, okay? And he said something that amazed me. My mentor early on was a guy by the name of Brad Johnson. He's the guy that introduced me to this stuff. He said, first of all of you, whether you believe it or not, are running guerrilla war campaigns. Because none of you can take on Home Depot, none of you can take on Lowe's, none of you can. So you look for the weakness, you pick the scab they don't do very well. You identify what those little things you can do, and then you have guerrilla warfare. When we're at Realty World, we couldn't take Century 21 on from a media standpoint. They had way too much money because they had way too many offices. And so we had to look and see what they didn't do very well. And they didn't train their people very well. So we hired the best trainer, and we trained better than anybody. And all of a sudden, we were getting sales because we were guerrilla warfare. Well, Gary Hamel said all great companies do this. They build a sales model, they identify their strengths, and he didn't call them that. Here's what he called them, and you may have heard of this. He called them core competencies. How many have ever heard of that? Core competencies was a language development by Gary Hamel. Excuse me. And let me give you an example of what a core competency is. Did you know that Honda does not consider themselves a manufacturer of automobiles? We got space those over here, folks. Don't worry about me. I'll just keep talking right along.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's right. No, I'm like the parish priest when the little kids are going out crying. It don't bother me at all. Okay? Honda does not consider themselves to be a manufacturer of automobiles. Honda considers themselves to be the greatest maker of motors and engines in the world. Now, if you're my age, and I won't tell you how old, but if you're my age or thereabouts, we all remember the Honda 50 motorcycle, then the Honda 75, then the Honda 100. My, they got up to 250 and we were really screaming. And then they had the Honda lawnmower. They had the Honda snowblower. They had the Honda outboard motor. And then all of a sudden one day, there's Cindy in a commercial driving her Honda Civic down the road, and the voiceover says, Cindy just joined the 500,000 mile club. And what did they sell? Reliability. Because they made the best engines and motors in the world. And you bought a Honda not for stylish looks, but the thing would run and run and run. And that was their core competency. Sony's core competency in the 90s was miniaturization. I'm a runner. I run 50, 60 miles a week. And I go by when those radios would come out, that big, you put them on your arm, and then they'd come out a half an inch smaller. You'd throw that one away and buy the next one. They'd come out another 6 months on half an inch smaller. And pretty soon you got the radio sticking right in your ear and you're running around. And they were in the miniaturization business, okay? So those were their core competencies, and they looked for places to take it. Honda went to outboard motors because boats need motors. Motorcycles need motors. Snowblowers need motors. Lawnmowers need motors. Cars need motors. Planes, and there's Honda jet engine planes, okay? And so that was what they did. But then Gary Hamel said, you do these three things, and then the pursuit of all businesses, and this changed the way I did everything. It changed my thinking on everything that I did from a selling standpoint. He simply said this, and it was so simple yet so profound. He said, the pursuit of all great companies is to sell what you deliver and deliver what you sell. How hard is that to do? How many of you have ever had a customer say, that's not what I expected? Raise your hand. What great companies do when they hear that is they simply say, what did you expect, and let's get it. There's no argument. Because if you argue and win the argument, you still lose. And what all great companies are more interested in delivering something than they are in selling something. But I go to most selling organizations, and most salespeople just want to make a sale, with no thought process as to whether or not can we even deliver it. Expectations, not clear expectations, are the boogeyman of all sales. And if maybe Tammy sells $2 million for me, but I got 23 callbacks. And Amber sells 1.1 million with 1 callback. No erosion of the margins whatsoever. I want to know what she's doing. And I want to figure out how I can help Emily make sure that she's not selling things that we can't deliver. And this industry is rife with it. We are the worst industry. We overpromise and underperform all the time to get deals, rather than deal with deal with them on a rational basis. So you are not in the business of selling something, you're in the business of delivering something. And when you get that into your head, all things change. Every time there's a miscommunication where the customer doesn't understand something, I have to own it, not the customer. Because somebody put that there. And so that's what happens. And this is very painful to do, but once you do it, you change your salespeople. Because they start thinking about, can we deliver it? They're not just trying to sell something. They're saying, can we even do this? Let's take time out. Let's go back and talk to Charlie. Charlie's our production guy. Charlie, can we do it this way? Charlie will say, no. Here's the reason why. We come back and say, we'd rather not sell you anything than sell you something we can't deliver. And what you're suggesting we can't do. But we could do it this way. You come back to your strength. You see how that works? So great companies are in the business of delivering, not selling. Now, I can summarize what we're going to do today in one small story. 27 years ago, I walked into Diamond Lake Hardware to buy myself a hammer. I know nothing about hammers. I was looking at 2 hammers. One was $11, one was $8. And I looked over the salesperson. I said, can you come over here? And they came over, and I said, so what's the difference between this $8 hammer and this $11 hammer? He looked at it, he looked at it, he looked at me, and he said, $3. And I said, well, I didn't say anything. I thought, well, why would anybody buy the $11 hammer if the only difference was it was $3 more since I buy the $8 hammer? But had that salesperson said, what's the difference? That's a plumb hammer. That's got a leather grip. That's made from high persimmon steel. That sucker's balanced out of the manufacturing facility. You can swing it all day and you won't get a sore elbow. I'd have said, sold. So the question you all have to ask yourself, how good are you at selling the $3? Is it an additional cost? Or is it an investment? And here's what you get. You see? Now I'm going to introduce you to somebody that none of you have ever heard of, but had a great influence in my life. His name is Maynard Garfield. Maynard Garfield was a professor at Northwestern Kellogg School of Business. For those of you that aren't aware of that school, it's considered one of the top 2 or 3 MBA programs in the United States, year in and year out. He taught there for well over 20 years. He had a side business called Persuasive Communications. I got to know him that way because we hired him at Realty World to help us get better at selling what we sold. And I spent 2 weeks in training with this guy. He was absolutely fascinating. But that's not why I want to bring him up. For 20 years at Northwestern University, his graduate students, what they did is they researched why people bought things. What was the psychology that went on when they made buying decisions, whether they were yay or nay? That was what was fascinating to me. And Maynard Garfield said something, and he had a lot of research. And one of the things he said is that, do you know that almost all customers, if they believe the salesperson is going to deliver what they sold them, they'll pay a little premium. So therein lies the problem. A, nobody trusts you because of our industry, so you have to earn that trust. And B, how do you sell the value proposition on a long-term basis so they're going to pay you a little bit more? How many people here have ever been asked this question? I'd just like to get a price from you. Can I see your hand? All right. Next time they do that, Carol, here's what I want you to say. I want you to look them dead square in the eyes and say, I'm sorry, we don't give prices. Okay? How many people here have something to do with the kitchen and bath industry of some kind? So I'm going to assume I'm a kitchen and bath dealer when I'm talking to Carol. But then I would say to Carol, but I'll tell you what we will do, Carol. We'll get you a fair price. based on the quality of our products, the quality of the people within the organization, the commitment our ownership has made that if we sell it to you, we're going to deliver it, and the ongoing feedback we get from a neutral third party that says our customers are not over 95% satisfied with our service. Is that the kind of business you're looking for in your kitchen remodel? And you see what I did there? You see, if you don't define price, your customer will. And you won't like the way they define it. How many of you have ever lost a deal and they came back to you 6 months and said, I should have went with you? Can I see your hand? Yeah, you can't pay your light bill on that, you know? And whose fault is it, by the way? It's your fault. You didn't sell the value proposition. It's not the customer's fault. It's your fault. And so that's what I talk about when you own things. And so why do you have to, you should be telling them what your fair price is early, often, and at the end. So when that customer says, it's a little too high, well, what don't you want, Charlie? Quality products? We can get you some crummy ones if you want to. You want me to give you the high school kid? I'll let the high school kid be the project manager, 12 bucks an hour. You'll be pissed off when you're done with him. You know? We cut the prices down here. You know? I mean, see what I'm saying? Because all Maynard Garfield and all their research showed that the customer wants that. Are there people in your marketplace that always seem to command a little higher price? Yeah. The reason why? Here, they figured this out. They figured this out. You're not in the business of selling something, you're in the business of delivering something. And you know what Gary Hamel told me, and this impacted me in such a way, he said, the only equity, the only value of your business is the quotient of customer satisfaction that you have in that business over the life you've owned it. And if that quotient is going this way, rather than this way, there's only two things that can happen. You've got to cut your price because they find out you aren't very good at what you're doing, or you're going to go out of business. And great companies have figured that out. That's why they say they don't argue with the customer. Because what's the point? And so often we get people that want to prove to the customer they're wrong. They win that battle and they lose the war. Because that customer is never going to say a good thing about them for the rest of their life. So that's what we're trying to do here today. Now, let's get started. I start come on folks, don't worry, come on in. Don't worry, no sweat. Did you have any luck at the tables? They lost all their money, so now they're coming to trade. So, I start every seminar I do with Chuck Swindoll. Anybody ever heard of Chuck Swindoll? Famous pastor. Attitude is everything. I can prove that right now. I'm going to prove it to you in 10 seconds. How many people here have ever worked with somebody with a great attitude? Can I see your hand? How many people here have ever worked with somebody with a bad attitude? Can I see your hand? Okay, which did you prefer? I go into Allen Edmond Food, so I go into Allen Edmond Food or Shoes. Anybody ever heard of Allen Edmonds? They're made out of Manitowoc, Wisconsin. $400 for a pair of loafers. Wow! Right, that's right. So I go in there and I want to get it right. And so I got this sales guy and I find out his name is Tommy Cease. And this guy is smiling and he's up and down, and I bet I tried on 25 pair of shoes and he never ever took the smile off his face, and he was the happiest guy in America. And I said to him, man, you got a good attitude. And he goes, I like my job. You know how they do that? And I said, have you ever thought about selling houses? He said, I don't know anything about it. He says, you don't need to know. I can teach you all you need to know, but I can't teach attitude. I learned a very valuable lesson from a guy by the name of Harold Waddell, who owned all the licensing rights of Realty World in Canada. And he told me one day, Mick, if God didn't give him a good attitude, what makes you think you can? Owners, if you have bad attitudes in your organization, step up to the plate, go home, get up tomorrow morning, and fire them. Seriously. Because everybody in the organization will say, it's about time. It's about time. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than the facts. It is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstance, than failure, than success, than what other people think or say or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every day in the attitude that we choose for that day. We cannot change the fact that people will act in certain ways. We cannot change the inevitable. All we can do is play on the one string